Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in, I guess. I guess I'll chat a little bit about my background in a minute. But uh, was a developer. Now I run a small agency. Chat a little bit more about that in a bit. But today I just want to talk to you all about how to get started as a freelancer. So the title of this talk is Do Work, Make Money. I am going to assume that just in case that you know nothing about freelancing. I know I think Harrison said he's been freelancing, done some freelance work a little bit before. I'm sure others of you have thought about it or have done some before, but I'm just going to give this talk as if you've never done any freelance work at all. That way I make sure and cover everything. And then if you have any questions at the end about things that are more specific or specific strategies or tactics, project management, the thing about being a freelancer is you're running all the aspects of a business. So there's a ton that we could talk about. So tried to keep it fairly basic today, and then figured we could dive a little deeper in the questions, or happy to come back another time and talk a little bit more in depth. So do work, make money. My name is Andrew. As I mentioned, I run a small agency called Crit based out of Charleston, South Carolina. We have currently 6 people. 5 of us are full-time, and then we have one team member who's based in Chattanooga, who helps me with marketing and writing content for our newsletter and for our blog. The three of us in this picture, I'm the one on top. We all started the company together. The 2 of us at the top there are still involved. Our third partner left in March to go work for Booz Allen Hamilton. All of us started off technical. Myself, I was originally an iOS engineer, and then when we started our company, we needed a front-end developer, so I just jumped in and started learning front-end. Bill, who is at the bottom, he left in March. He was a back-end engineer, and then Austin in the middle was a designer. And then as I started to phase out of front-end development to take over more and more of sales and marketing, he taught himself front-end development. And so these days he does a little bit of everything. He also sort of serves as our de facto project manager. So a little different, I've done some freelance work on my own before. I did it before I started Crit, but Crit is really an agency. We're not necessarily freelancers, but there's a lot of similarities between running a really small agency. I still consider us super small, and then freelancing, because you still have to be willing to wear lots of hats and do lots of different things. We specialize in building web mobile apps for non-technical founders. So we work mostly with early stage startups. We do a quick little bit about our tech stack, since all of you are learning this right now. We use Ember on the front end, Django and Python on the back end, and then we mostly do native mobile apps, but we also have started doing a little bit of React Native, and then we have one project that we maintain that's a React project as well. So do a little bit of everything, but our core tools are Django and Ember. So yeah, happy to talk more about that stuff too at the end if anyone has any technical questions they want to ask. So I'm just going to jump into this. If you take nothing else away from this talk, if you want to be a freelancer and you're paying attention to this and you take nothing else away, I want you to take away that the single most important thing, more important than how talented you are, more important than the quality of your design work, than the quality of your development work, the most important thing to being a successful freelancer is the way you treat people. If you are nice and approachable and you treat people with respect, and you prove that you're trustworthy and that you're going to do the things that you say you're going to do, and you're friendly and people like you, that will take you much further than being an incredible developer who can build absolutely anything or having the perfect portfolio. half of our clients never even see our portfolio before they decide to hire us. And I'm not exaggerating there. We have clients who have committed to working with us on, projects that ultimately end up being worth $100,000 or more, and they don't ever see our portfolio website. Your portfolio website is not what matters. What matters is that you respect them, that you know what you're talking about, and that you do the things you say you're going to do. Obviously, a portfolio is a great thing to have, but this is the big takeaway. Another thing that I would love for you to leave with today is that, communication really is everything. I would say a good rule of thumb is if you don't feel like you're over communicating, then you need to communicate more. There's so many times still today. So we've now been a company for almost 5 years. We've been really a full-time agency for probably 3 or 4 of those years. And there's still times today where I mess up and I don't communicate enough. And I always end up regretting it. We're still working on doing a better job of keeping clients up to date, reporting things to them. So if you're not interested in communicating, if you're really someone who just wants to put your head down and write code all day, every day, freelancing is going to be a really tough path for you. There could still be some opportunities where you get you have a single 1 or 2 large contracts at a time, and you're really just integrating with the team, and you're technically a freelancer, but not really. And you might be able to, get away with just being purely technical, but even in a technical team, even in a full-time position, you need to be a good communicator. And then expectations. So before we actually started our agency, we were building software tools for freelancers. And so I talked to a ton of freelancers, and the freelancers who had success understood that they needed to set expectations and then make sure they meet those expectations. And the freelancers who struggled, 9 times out of 10, it wasn't because they weren't talented. It was because they just could not manage their expectations. And so that's where you get things like scope creep, where clients start asking for more and more things. Clients get disappointed by the end product, disappointed by the speed of the product. So many different things. Like, just do everything you can to, under promise, over deliver. And then finally, if you're going to go the freelance route and you're going to really go all in and be a full-time freelancer or even a part-time freelancer, you've got to understand that you're going to work your ass off. You're going to make mistakes. You should plan to make mistakes, plan for that time to happen. And then you've just got to be willing to shake it off and do it again. We're a super transparent company. We, you can read about our financials on our blog, and we've written pretty openly about our mistakes, the things we've screwed up with our financials, the things we've screwed up with estimating projects. You just can't let it shake your confidence. You got to keep working at it. And I mean, you'll probably notice that all of these things that I'm telling you right now are true, not just of freelancers, but of any job. And yeah, that's really the case. All right, so now I'm going to get into talking about how to actually go through the mechanics of a project. And the very first thing you have to do is you have to find people who are willing to pay you. Call it marketing, call it sales, call it business development, whatever you want. You have to find people to pay you. Before you can do the work, you got to find someone who's willing to part with their money in exchange for your time and your skills. So if you're just getting started and you're not an SEO genius, or you don't have a ton of money to spend on advertising, the very first thing you should do is just use your network. Send an email to everyone who you've ever done work with. Reach out to your past bosses, reach out to friends and family, and just let them know, hey, I am now accepting freelance work. If you hear of anything, let me know. Most of our business still to this day comes through the personal network that I've built. So we work, we're based in Charleston, South Carolina. You might think Charleston, South Carolina is in a huge tech hub. It's not San Francisco, it's not New York. And that's true, but most of our clients don't come from Charleston. But all of our clients, almost to a T, except for 1 or 2, have come through people that I know personally. So that's past bosses. It's, people I've worked with in the past. It's friends who have companies. One of our biggest clients ever was an investor in a friend's company. And that just comes from, getting to know people, getting to know other entrepreneurs, that sort of thing. So, don't discount your network. Really take the time to sit down and think about who you know, and just reach out to them and let them know what's going on. And, you don't want to ever expect anything in return, at least not right away. But you want to let them know what you're doing. Best source of new work is existing work. So happy clients, you really want to go above and beyond and create a client experience that will wow people. You want people to leave saying like, man, I really just love that. I would tell anyone to use this person. And for us, we don't honestly get a ton of work from our past clients. We get great testimonials, and all of that stuff helps us to sell new projects. Our clients are like clientele, non-technical founders. In some cases they know each other, in some cases they don't know a whole lot of other founders. So it's kind of hit or miss, but especially if you're, say, going all in on the healthcare industry, and so you're building websites for doctors. I guarantee you doctors know other doctors. And so the people you work with, if you do a great job, will tell people about it. So this can, at its core, this just means being trustworthy. It means managing expectations. It means doing what you said you're going to do. But then it also means finding those little opportunities to go above and beyond. Maybe you do a little extra work for somebody that you don't bill, and you sort of let them know, hey, I spent a couple hours on this. Not going to bill you for it. Just thought it was worth doing. You want to be careful about that. You don't want to set the expectation that your time isn't valuable, but there's all sorts of things you can do. You can send your clients a handwritten note, send your clients just some sort of little thank you when a project gets started or when a project's complete. All of those things, those little extra touches, go a really long way in getting great testimonials and creating a positive client experience. And ultimately that means getting more work. So building cool shit. So I know you all have come from a bunch of different backgrounds. Myself, I didn't have any experience with marketing or sales before I started this company. And so a lot of times I didn't really have any clue what to do when it came to selling and marketing myself. But I just took every opportunity I could to build something fun, build something cool. So this is a silly little project, Llama Attack, that I built with a friend of mine. He had done a lot of great things for me over the years, had helped me out when I was stuck with, he helped us file our first ever tax return. And he came to me one day and said, hey man, me and a friend are working on this really silly little thing. We want to send, we want to create a little website where people can enter a phone number, pay $1, and then send funny llama puns to their friends, just bombard them with llama puns. And it was stupid, but it was fun. And I was like, okay, yeah, let's do it. And so I built the front end and designed it for him. He paid me in pizza and beer. At the time, it was great. I just did it. I spent maybe 5 nights working with him on it. He built the back end, I built the front end and the design. And I didn't make much money off of this, but I got to know the guy he was doing it with, and we became friends. And then lo and behold, probably 6 months later, that guy came to me and he was like, hey, I'm working with this nonprofit group and we really want to build a website to connect kids in underprivileged areas to professionals who would be willing to come and speak at their school. And I immediately thought of you guys. Would you be willing to build that for us? And that wasn't a massive project, but it was probably, I think it was a $15,000 project. And all of that, that only came because I just built something silly and cool. So if you don't, if you're not someone who is naturally inclined to be a good marketer, just start by building things and putting them out there. build them with other people. You'll build up a little bit of a portfolio, and a lot of times, those things will get in front of the right person, and then they'll go, hey, I want you to help me build something like that. Next step in finding people to pay you is, build the cool shit, and then make sure you write about it. Make sure you talk about it. Make sure you tell people about it. I don't know. I'm someone who, for most of my life, is really valued humility in other people, and so I hated ever feeling like I was bragging on myself. I just it makes my skin crawl when I see other people bragging on themselves. And like instantly, no, I don't want to talk to you. But as a freelancer or an entrepreneur at all, you have to find a balance there. You have to get over that feeling a little bit. And a lot of times, for me, what's helped is like, oh, I'll brag about my team, or, as a freelancer, you might work on a project with another freelancer and you can brag about them. But you've really got to get over that and start to just talk about it. I mean, it seems silly, but even just, again, going back to your network, sharing things on your personal social media accounts, shooting an email to a friend with something you did and being like, hey, I thought you'd think this was fun. Post it on Designer News, post it on Hacker News, post it, find a subreddit and post it on Product Hunt if you build something. You've got to just get in the habit of constantly sharing the things that you're working on, and figuring out how to brag about yourself a little bit. Because at the end of the day, like, no one cares if you did something cool unless they hear about it. And the vast majority of people aren't going to see it as bragging. They're just going to go, hey, that's cool. Great job. Let me show you this cool thing I did. So make sure you build cool shit, and then make sure you write about it or talk about it. Finally, get out in the community. So, whether you're looking for a full-time job, looking for freelance work, again, personal network, personal connections, and you've got to grow that network somehow. And for me, still to this day, that is mostly just getting out and talking to people, going to local startup events, going, maybe all you want to do is JavaScript, and you think you can work for other agencies or something like that. So go hang out at the JavaScript meetup. If you're an introvert, I know this stuff's tough, but you've got to be willing to just push yourself outside of your comfort zone a little bit. Get out there and just, shake hands, talk to people, be nice, put a smile on, and just, be genuinely interested in people. Try to get to know them, get to know what they're all about. And again, you're not going to get something out of it right away, but over time, if you do it enough and you show up, people will appreciate that, and eventually they'll start to really resonate with it. And you just talk to them about what you're working on, and eventually someone's going to go, hey, I just met Jessica, and she's looking for someone who builds web apps for non-technical founders. Can I introduce you? So again, not some crazy sexy answer, but at the end of the day, one of the most effective things for getting new business is just getting out there and shaking hands. And then this is sort of, I could give an entire presentation on positioning, but I did want to mention it just at the end here is positioning yourself really, really matters. And it took me an embarrassingly long time to figure this out. So positioning, for anyone who doesn't know that term, is basically just how you describe yourself. You hear the advice if you read, any sort of how-to books or business books at all. Find your niche, find your niche, find your niche. And really all your niches is it's you telling people about the kind of work you do. Maybe you do super technical Rust development, and your niche is you are obsessed with the Rust language, and you're looking only for people who want to work in Rust. A more approachable niche is you build mobile apps. And anytime someone needs a mobile app, how you talk about yourself matters. There was years where there was another agency here in town who also built apps for startups, basically, and everything they did, like their website, their name, their copy, everything they did was we build startups, startups. And, I would talk to people about what we did, and they'd go, sorry, had someone at our door delivering a package. So we talk to people about what they did and what we did, and I just couldn't understand why other people didn't understand that we did the same thing. And as silly as it is, I finally just had to realize that it's because we weren't telling people we did that. We were telling people that we were just a digital agency, and no one knows what that means. So, just experiment with this. It's not something you're probably going to figure out right away. It took us several years of calling ourselves a digital product agency or a development shop or a bunch of things before we started to hone in on, we build apps for non-technical founders, which is much more specific. Still could be a lot more specific. We're still working on it. It takes time. But start thinking about it from day one. Start thinking about who are the people that you really love to do work for, who are the people that your skills really match up with, who are the people that you're interested in learning more about, and just go all in on that. What are the skills you have? Maybe it's there's a woman online, Val Geyser, and her whole thing is, I help people with their email onboarding sequences. I help people make great email onboarding sequences. And more specifically, SaaS founders make great email onboarding sequences. So just, try to find your thing, and, don't worry if you don't have it right away, but be thinking about it. So once you land a project, or, once you start talking to people, you're eventually going to get presented with an opportunity to do the work. So what does that look like? Just going to run through that, and we'll sort of, I'll share some of the tools that we use, some of the processes that we've developed, some of the questions that we really like, and then we'll just go from there. So very first, eventually a client is going to come to you, and or they won't even be a client yet, right? They'll be a lead, a potential client. And the very first thing you need to do is you need to get in the mindset of, you're not just pitching them, you're not selling them, you're really interviewing them, you're educating them. I was scared to do sales for a long time. I thought of sales as this sleazy thing, until I finally realized, oh no, sales is just learning about people and then teaching people about what you do. And I was like, I love that. I love learning about other people, and I love teaching people things. So really shift your mindset from, oh, I'm pitching people, I'm trying to shove whatever I'm doing down their throat, and think about it more as interviewing. So the goals of interviewing a client, you want to start building rapport with them. You want to get to know them and start to build that connection, because again, number one thing, people will hire you because they like you. They'll, tell other people about you because they had a good experience working with you. And all of that comes down to relationships. So start building a relationship, start building a rapport. Make sure you understand not just what they're telling you they want done, but what is the underlying problem they're trying to solve. No one actually wants a website. People want more sales for their business. They want to be able to take time off of work because they're making so much money. They want to spend more time with their kids. What is the underlying problem that they're trying to solve? Figure that out before you try to really sell them something. Because half the time clients come to us, they're like, oh, I need an app. And one, if I take the time to ask them why instead of immediately selling them, that makes an impression that establishes trust. But two, most of the time they don't need an app. They're just like, oh yeah, apps are what everyone has. I need a mobile app. And when they say app, they're usually thinking, an iPhone app, an Android app. So understand the underlying problem, determine if they're a good fit for you, and you're a good fit for them too. So this can be really hard to do when you're getting started. It can be really scary to turn things away. And to some degree, you got to pay the bills, right? That next line, be as picky as you can afford to be. So you've got to pay the bills. You're going to have to take on some work that's maybe not perfect to figure out what work you really are best at. That's totally fine. But try to have an abundance mindset. Try to remind yourself that there's plenty of work to go around, and you don't need to take everything, and you really shouldn't take everything. When you refer someone to someone else, again, that establishes trust. And even though they're not going to be a client right now, they may come back to you later on when they are a good fit for you, or they'll refer someone else because they'll go, hey, this is a good person. Like, they didn't try to sell me something. They sent me to someone else who was a better fit. So I think you'll be perfect for them. And, it really turns people into advocates. So just a few specific questions that we like to ask people. These have changed a little bit, but just try to figure out what they want first. Do they want a single landing page? Do they even know what they want? Why do they want it? So that's getting at that underlying problem. If you're here, you're probably a developer, and so you're thinking about freelancing as a developer. So it's important to get a feel for how technical they are. We work with people who are super, super not technical. We work with people who only ever use their phone. They don't really mess around with a computer unless they absolutely have to. That's totally fine, but it's important to know that because sometimes it means there's going to be more hand-holding, more guidance. It's just important to know. And then again, getting at that underlying problem, like what are their actual business goals? Try to figure that out. What's their story? Where did this all come from? Really, just the kinds of things you'd ask anybody you want to get to know. And again, don't want to harp on it too much, but if they're not a good fit and you can afford to, try to refer them to someone else who is. It sounds silly, but like what goes around really does come around. I have to remind myself of this still today because, there are times where things are slow and I'm like, I just want to take anything. And to some degree, I will sometimes take things that aren't a perfect fit. But if I hear something and it's a really obviously bad fit, it's never going to be worth it. You're going to just, make yourself miserable, make your client miserable. You're probably not going to make as much money. It's just going to be tough. So next, discovery. So discovery is, again, like one of the most important parts of a project. Most of the stuff I'm talking about today is not, how to actually write code, right? It's how to be a good freelancer. And having a structured discovery process is super, super important for being a good freelancer. You want to find out as much as you can about this person, what's driving them, what they care about, and you want to spend time educating them. You are an expert. If you are freelancing, you are an expert. You know about your industry, you know about programming, you know about tech. It may not feel that way at the start, but you have to remind yourself that compared to what your clients know, you are an expert. And so you owe it to yourself and to them to own that, and to educate them. Go above and beyond. Don't just do exactly what they tell you to do. Challenge them, ask them questions. So discovery. The goals of discovery should be to ask questions, begin to establish expectations. So start to, educate them, teach them about how long is this really going to take? How much is it really going to cost? Determine a budget and timeline. It can be really scary to ask people for a budget. I still get scared asking people for a budget sometimes because I don't want to scare them off. It's helpful to just try to get a ballpark, right? Are we talking $500, $5,000, $50,000, $500,000? And, some people will push back. Some people who have a more old school mindset will say, oh, I don't want to tell you that because then you'll just drive up your price. And you say, well, look, I can build, if you've read any freelancing stuff, you've heard this before, but it's kind of become a trope. But you tell them, I can build you a Camry, I can build you a Lexus, or I can build you a Tesla. It just depends on what your budget is and what you really need. If I hear your goals and your goals are to sell, 1 million cars, I'm not going to build you a Tesla because it's just going to take too long. If your goal is to sell a few cars and design and save the earth, then yeah, you've got the money, let's build the Tesla. Um, and at the end of the discovery process, you'll have to put together some sort of proposal. We have closed proposals that were as simple as just a long email. We have done much fancier proposals, and what we do now is something in between. It's ends up being about 9 pages, but it's also not. A lot of that stuff is templated. The first page is just a cover page. So then, and then there's like some sketches in there, and a lot of white space. So it's not as crazy as 9 pages sounds. We also work on what I consider to be fairly large projects. When you're starting off, you might bite off some smaller projects first. So, just find what works for you, but you'll have to put together some sort of proposal. And in that, you want to, sort of reiterate to them, what they care about, what their goals are, all of that. One, so that you have it written down for the future. So you can go back to them and say, well, this is why we did this, because you said your goals were this. And 2, to show them that you're listening to them. And then, if at all possible, try charging for this. So charging for discovery has been one of our single biggest game changers in the last 4 years. I took a course from Brennan Dunn. I'll link to some of his stuff later on, but he convinced me to start every project off with a road mapping process. So road mapping process is where you take something that you can do for the client that has value, but that's much smaller in scale than the thing you really want to sell. So for us, we want to sell app development. We want to take your idea, help you scope it out and design it, and then build a functional MVP, minimum viable product. And so a project for us is generally between $50,000 and $75,000. That's a big number for most people. Not for some agencies, but for most people, that's a pretty big number. So what we do is, we were before creating proposals for free, going through the discovery process for free. And to do it right takes us about 25, 30 hours. At our rates, that's like, our rates are changing right now, but it's easily worth $5,000 or more. And so we finally were like, we've got to start charging for this. And we were terrified that we weren't going to be able to sell any, and we weren't going to be able to get any clients. And now we sell at least one a month. And we're still selling them for less than like a normal product. Like it's probably worth $5,000. We sell it for $2,500. That's fine. We look at it as a loss leader. We're like, hey, this is just to get people in the door and to sort of see who's serious and who's not. And we try to make sure that they're getting a lot of value out of it early on, because if they spend $2,500 with us and get something that's feels like it's worth $5,000 or $10,000, then you're setting the expectation that, oh, if I give them $50,000, I'm going to get $100,000 worth of value. And that's what we want, because that then helps us sell the project. So what does the discovery process actually look like? For us, we have a template of discovery questions. I tweak it a little bit for each person, but it's 3 or 4 pages just in a Google Doc. I've linked to an example of this. Basically everything I reference in here, I put into a GitHub repo that I'll link to at the end. So discovery questions, a few good things to ask, some really important things. Budget, we talked about that. Who is your target audience? Super, super important. You want to understand, if you're building anything for anyone, who their customer is, and really help them understand. If you hear a client say, oh, our customer is everyone, that's fine. It happens all the time, but you're going to want to push back on that and say, well, okay, that's not super helpful. Let's see, who would your ideal customer be? Who is the perfect person? What do they look like? Because that'll help impact the design decisions you make. The development decisions should impact a lot of what you're recommending to them that they do. Again, remember, you're the expert. Risks, I love to ask people what are the biggest risks, because this just gets them spoken out loud, and so then you can address them. What does success look like? What metrics will be used? Do they really care about getting a return in terms of money? You would think that every client would, but like the nonprofit project that we did for 15,000, they weren't ever going to see $1 of that back. They wanted to see that. They wanted to see that the product was just being used. And sometimes some of this stuff is going to be outside of your control as a developer. Some of it depends on their marketing plan, their sales team, whatever it is. But if you understand what success looks like for them, then you can help frame that and explain to them, I know you said success looks like that. Your marketing plan didn't work quite as well. The product was still built to do this. It just helps you to have a conversation. And then I love to ask people, like, what emotions do they want people to feel? I think that's fun. Google Ventures has some good questions, like asking people, do they good questions for branding specifically, like, do they see themselves luxury or affordable? There's all these different questions. You can find this stuff pretty easily online. But yeah. So once you finish discovery, you'll want to put together a proposal and a contract. In order to do that, you're going to need to price your project. So I would recommend starting with an hourly rate. There's a lot of people who love to argue about hourly rates versus fixed rates. Early on, when you're just getting started, it's going to be really, really hard to estimate things accurately. So I would start with an hourly rate. In order to pick that hourly rate, you can do some research into what average hourly rates are around you. I would recommend, though, just starting by estimating your costs, dividing and build some profit into those costs. Divide by the number of billable hours you've estimated this will take. And ultimately, you just got to pick something. And then I recommend you pick something, and then each new client who you interview, increase it until no one will hire you. And then you know what your rate should be, because you want your rate to be as high as the market will allow. So our hourly rate for the last couple of years has been $125 an hour. These days, we are increasing it to $140. Plenty of shops sell, bill $250 an hour, $300 an hour, $350 an hour, but $140 seems like it works pretty well for us. We also, have experimented with weekly rates and fixed rates, and you can do all of that. But for your first project, for your first few projects, I would keep it simple. Just do hourly. It's easier to explain to people. How to put together an estimate. Estimate the number of hours it will take you to do the work. Obviously, a lot of that ultimately comes down to gut feel. Make sure you're doing your research, though. Make sure you're reading documentation. If you're building an app from scratch and you're building a backend, make sure you actually take the time to think about the data models that you're going to need, the different endpoints you're going to need, because all of that matters. I would recommend breaking estimates down, so don't have one task that's like 50 hours, but also don't have a bunch of tasks that are 1 hour. Try to shoot for 3 to 10 hours. I say multiplied by 3 or 4. And honestly, for our first few projects that were really big projects, that's about right. We really screwed up. I wrote a blog post where I talked about, we improved our estimates by 1,000%. That's insane. That's how bad we were at this early on. But definitely, you don't have to multiply by 3 or 4, but definitely build in a solid amount of buffer. These days, we usually do between 10 and 30% buffer, and that typically works out pretty well. Multiply by your hourly rate, and then I would also say try to keep your proposals from being too jargony. Things to remember, I sort of touched on these. If you are going to need to do more research once the project starts, make sure you estimate time for that. Make sure you include time for project management, so for weekly calls, for if you're having to work with other contractors, Make sure you build in a lot of time for bug fixing. Don't, again, plan for the worst case scenario. Undersell, over deliver. Under promise, over deliver. Branding, if you're going to be doing design work, revisions, I would recommend you write automated tests, which means you then need to build time for automated tests. If you're not going to do automated tests, build time for manual tests. Deployment, if you're not a DevOps person, if you're not someone who loves tinkering around with servers, then try to keep it simple. Use something like Heroku that handles most of that for you. If you're scared to present the high costs of something like Heroku versus AWS to your clients, just remind yourself that it would cost more for you to spend 20 hours messing around with it than it would for them to just spend a couple $100 a month. So this is what an estimate looks like for us. And this varies, we're always tweaking this, but this is sort of a good simple template. So you'll see we'll break it down into like front end, back end, design, development for front end, back end. Don't really do design, although maybe we should. Estimate time for like design. Got a buffer here, and again, I think I have an example of the spreadsheet in that GitHub repo. I would also recommend at some point you add actual columns to all of these things so that you can track your estimate versus your actual, because if you don't do that, then you don't know how accurate your estimate really is and where the problems are, and so then you don't know what to change later. Put it together, try to make it look pretty. It's if you are not someone who is good at making Word documents look pretty nice, then there's a ton of tools out there, like Proposify, I think, is one that's been out there for a long time. BidSketch. Try some of those out. They've got great templates. And then if you are trying to figure out like maybe it's only a couple $1,000, should I start with a contract or not? Yes, just yes. Sign a contract. It's annoying, it's boring, do it. There may even be a contract template in that GitHub repo. I'll check at the end. Things to remember in your contract, a few things real quick. Make sure you outline as clearly as possible the scope of the work, include an indemnification clause, basically a clause that says, hey, don't sue me. What happens if the project breaks down and you or the client needs to quit? Who gets paid what? Where's the work go? I like to include a pause clause. That's basically just a clause that says, if you don't get the stuff you're supposed to get to me on time, I can pause the project indefinitely. It's just a useful tool for, again, setting expectations and making sure you get the things you need from clients. You always think, it's going to be easy to get things from clients, but they've got a million things going on in their life. You are not the most important piece of their life. And so it's always harder than you think. And make sure you establish who owns the work. I would recommend you, especially early on, insist on including a clause that even if the client owns the work outright, which all of our clients do, that you retain rights for using it in your portfolio. Never once had a problem with someone, like people have negotiated other clauses in our contract. That one has never, ever been a problem. So we get to use everything in our portfolio, which is super helpful. If you need a lawyer, cprolgroup.com. These are some good friends of ours. They are not taking on a ton of new clients, but still worth reaching out to because they're super affordable. They are both, it's a husband and wife team. They have both been engineers themselves in the past, so they really understand this stuff. So check them out. I don't have any other legal recommendations because they're who we've used since the beginning. So project management, how am I doing on time? Okay, so I'm gonna go kind of quickly here. Project management, manage your projects, just kidding. So you're probably not communicating enough. I would recommend weekly or bi-weekly updates. Make sure to give people a heads up when new work is pushed. Send invoices on the same day every month. I would recommend invoicing at the beginning of the month, not the end of the month. If you can, if you're doing like true hourly, you can't always do that. If you can move away from hourly to like weekly or monthly pricing, then you can do that better. So just something to think about. Do not try to hide problems or delays from your client. Be upfront, let them know. Again, this all goes into managing expectations. Make sure that you are asking for what you need from them. Don't be afraid to ask. Use a staging server when possible and push things to it regularly. That's good agile development practice. And it also keeps clients happy because they get to see progress. When possible, we use Trello and Slack. And it's great, we keep a Trello board for each client. We keep a Trello board for us internally. And then we have Slack where we communicate about little things. And then we also have a weekly phone call with almost every client, weekly or bi-weekly. Some clients that doesn't work for. I'm personally of the opinion that you shouldn't force clients to do what works for you, that you should do what works best for them. So I have a client who has spent, to this point, almost $350,000 with us. I have had one 20-minute phone call with him, and have all of our other communication has gone via text or email. He now thankfully has people working for him who I have regular phone calls with. But that's, sometimes you've just got to make it work because your clients are busy. And again, I think you should do what works for them. Budget template, getting paid. Do it, get paid, make people pay you. Don't be afraid to ask for money. It's important. It will take longer than you think. I recommend billing everything net 15. If someone asks for net 30, you can decide if that's worth it to you or not. That basically means they have 15 days from the day they get their invoice to give you your money. Cash flow is a big problem when you're doing client work because you get large checks and you get them, sometimes you get them regularly, sometimes you don't. Clients will, if you let them, again, no one likes to give people large chunks of money, and they've got other things on their mind. So it's not that clients are evil or anything like that. It's just that they've got other stuff going on. So make sure you send invoices regularly, charge up front when possible, take a deposit, track your time really diligently. You've got to get really good at that, especially if you're doing hourly. Be honest. At 15. Taxes suck. Just hire a CPA. Don't try to do it on your own. It's not worth it. Just, you can get a good CPA for a couple $100 a year. Stick it in your budget and do it. Sign up for QuickBooks or Wave or something like that. Use it. Get to where you're comfortable with it and you know how to do the basic stuff. You don't need to do anything complicated. Just make sure you're keeping track of everything, so that at the end of the year, your CPA can take all of that and do what they need to do. We were really bad about this for a long time and we totally screwed up our books and it was a pain in the butt. So I really wish we had signed up for QuickBooks earlier on. And then of course, the great thing about being a freelancer is you get to write a bunch of stuff off. So make sure you take advantage of that. And don't forget to save that money, because if you don't save for taxes, then it's going to hurt down the road. So don't spend everything you get. You're going to have downtime. You're going to have to pay taxes. You're going to have expenses you didn't expect. Make sure you're being smart with your finances and just save money for the tough times. Okay, so that's pretty much everything I've got for y'all today. I hope this was helpful and mildly interesting. This is my personal email address. Feel free to use it, andrew@builtbycrit.com. I do not respond super fast, but I promise I'll get back to you within a couple of days. I'm happy to, someone asked for feedback on their portfolio. I love talking shop. I love talking about freelancing and getting clients and sales and marketing and project management, all of that stuff. So feel free to ask me questions if you have them. Happy to answer. A few tools that we use Toggle for time tracking, but Harvest is awesome too. Harvest also does invoices. We use QuickBooks for invoicing and managing our books. FreshBooks is great. Wave is good. Wave is a lot prettier than FreshBooks. Project management, we use Trello and Slack. There's a million project management tools out there. I'm not going to tell you which ones to use. I also personally use Todoist. For contracts, if you're trying to create your first contract, Bonsai is a super, super useful tool. It also has time tracking and a million other things. And yeah, this is a link to a GitHub repo that has these slides and some other resources. So there's that budget template, discovery questions, proposal template, even our contract template. Just promise if you use it and you get screwed that you won't sue me, please. Some blog posts here, and then links to all of those, all those tools. So yeah, I hope this was helpful. Anyone have any questions? Here, I'll post this link in here. Everyone, cool. There's that link. Okay.
So let's see, we got a question from Ahmed. It was right above your link.
Okay, cool. How do you protect yourself from a client seeking to gain designs or technical advice for free? So charging for discovery is a really helpful tool. So if you charge for discovery and just explain to any client that that's just a part of your process, then you're drawing lines in the sand. You're saying like, hey, I'm happy to talk to you for half an hour, happy to talk to you for an hour, get to know you a little bit. But in order to get started on a project, you've got to pay me. We charge up front for that discovery process. So for us, we do a full day consulting session and then a couple weeks of research. And we charge $2,500 for that up front. Basically, I say, all right, cool, let's book it. Once we get a calendar date, then I send discovery questions and an invoice, and the client pays up front. And so doing that is a really helpful way to set natural boundaries with people. And then on the technical advice side, sometimes I do give technical advice away for free, as long as it's, it's just sort of a personal preference thing, as long as it's not taking up too much of my time. If it's just like, half an hour or an hour, that stuff can go a long way in just creating goodwill. Anything that's more strenuous than that, actually like creating designs or something like that, that's where I personally draw the lines. You just got to kind of find those lines for yourself. How did you find your first clients? So exactly the way I outlined in the talk. I mean, it's nothing crazy or brilliant or strategic. It's just our very first client came from my former boss. And then I think we did sign up for a service called Workshop. It's now focused more on UX design, but at the time, we got like a little $750 landing page project out of that. And then that $750 landing page project turned into a $30,000 development project. So I've done some cold emailing. I've reached out to people on AngelList, and through that Workshop, basically Workshop just sources jobs from a bunch of different job boards, and then gives you an email address so you can reach out to people. So I've done a little bit of that too, but at the end of the day, the most effective thing is just networking and getting to know people. Cool.
Awesome. So it looks like we are at the end of the hour. I want to be respectful of your time. Thanks so much for coming and chatting with us and talking about freelancing. And students, make sure to take advantage of the help that Andrew's offering, and go back and look at the slides and look at all the fun links he's got in the GitHub repo. So yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for coming today. And I'm going to go ahead and close out the meeting.
All right. Thanks so much. Y'all have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.